for Passion Hospice in San Antonio. Welcome, Anna. Thanks for joining us today on our channel.
Oh, thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. So from my understanding, you're a certified end-of-life doula and educator that works with hospice.
Yes, I do. I work on staff with hospice in my local state here in San Antonio, Texas.
Perfect. So I do want to say that I'm glad that you're here, just because, well, one is because I feel like the doula is very important, and you're one of the first doulas on my channel, so welcome. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, perfect. Now, with this being, like I said, an important topic, I feel like there's a big movement towards this, and it's a very big need out there in society today. And so I've been guided to start bringing doulas on and having conversations to help make it more mainstream. Not to mention that I am also a doula, though I do a little bit of different doula than what other people may be doing.
Mhm.
It falls under the umbrella of doula. And I feel like it has different niches that can fall under there because not everybody has that background or experience or what others can do. So it's kind of like a team from my understanding of what doula is, as far as the death doula, end of life doula. So that can be like a broad perspective, and everybody has their role and fit in it. And it's kind of like bringing everybody together, and then they can help out because there's a lot of lack in the system. And I work at a assisted living right now, and so I can just see from there, how there's lack of coverage and different things that's needed and whatnot. um but how is that for you? Do you see that there's like a gap and missing opportunities that we can fill with the deaf doula?
Oh, absolutely. As we may know, an end-of-life doula or death doula is a non-medical person. We come in and meet people emotionally, physically, spiritually. And yes, I've been doing this for over 25 years, and I have seen before COVID, during COVID, after COVID, and unfortunately, our medical system is broken. We're just going to be honest about that. It is
Yeah.
broken, and the things that happen with insurance side. And this is where the doula role comes into play. But one thing I think a lot of people miss is they get so focused on just focusing just on end of life with somebody. We are failing to reach those who before a terminal illness. Doula work starts before as well. Now, do we get called out? A lot of times, yeah, I get called out for crises. That's okay. We're there for that too. But doulas need to start working with people now rather than later, um, because we are like an embedment to families. Think about it. We have a mechanic maybe that everybody in our family uses. We're kind of like that. Or maybe there is a doctor at one point. We don't have this much more, happening much time now, but the doctor that everybody in the family used to see, right? They saw everybody and the cousins and the aunts and the uncles and everybody. We don't have that much as that happening now, but that's what the doula role is. We get engraved with families, getting to know their personal history, with the family history, medical history, and then we can provide support. And I have families that I have worked with for many years now that, hey, my Aunt Susie is now, she's going through a cancer diagnosis and I want you to talk to her. And so we start with the pre-planning. And like you mentioned earlier, every doula role and their practice is different. We all have our great niches that we're really good at. But that also brings me to why we need a community. We need a community of doulas because in my practice, I do a lot of work with advanced planning. I do a lot of work with end of life education. So if I have someone who maybe needs Reiki, right, then I can call you and say, hey, you know what? I have a client that is requesting this. Can you come in and work this case with me? Or, maybe they need a grief doula, right? I can call one of my grief doulas into this case as well. So we really are a bridge. We're an advocate for families, support, and helping them navigate the medical system that we have and what they're experiencing in their life to help them to be of resource, to be of service to them.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and I definitely see that. And I love that because then we can, and that's part of my goal is to, get connected with other doulas. And if I can't do that in my area, or I know somebody who maybe can do distance, because Reiki you can do distance, certain things, they can jump in and take over in that spot where I'm not well in versed in, as far as my background. So that's part of my goal, here in Florida, to have a community as well, to help fill those gaps in that way too. But definitely the medical is kind of lacking in certain areas. So
Mhm.
perfect. So how did your calling to be an end of life doula and educator play out? 'Cause I know for me, mine was really interesting. I've had like this love-hate relationship with life and death my whole life. And then, so that's why I have Life, Death, and Beyond as mine, my business. And to play into part with that kind of whole love-hate relationship with life and death ended in like a near-death experience. So that kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different things and how what I've taken away from that experience. That's been my own personal teaching and journey. So it has now brought me into being a doula, a death doula, um, and I do Reiki, things like that. So I find it's really interesting how like life brings you into your purpose, and it's not for everybody. And so we do have our life purpose or divine calling. So, and that's the path that we take, or we can choose. I mean, we can choose not to do it, but I choose to do the call, to follow the calling,
Mhm.
basically. So how did yours kind of play out?
So I started very, very young. I started at the age about 15, 16, and working with a family friend, my best friend. I consider them like family, and working through a loss for or taking care of someone before they passed, and getting that whole experience of understanding and seeing hospice very first up in, close hand. And then it just continued. I've worked on hospice crisis care team, the hospice inpatient unit as well. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing was the hospice crisis care team, because we would go in and there was a crisis of something going on. We were there to help support the family. But even there, I would see different things that really bridged me into where pushing me more into my doula work was. Sometimes we would have, once the what was happening, right? The symptom, once it was relieved or stable, then we were out. Then they went to regular care, right? And so seeing that there were families that were their faces was like, oh my gosh, now you're leaving and I don't have nobody here. And the biggest misconception I find too, working on hospice, is that they always think at first, oh, that you're coming into my home and you're going to be here 24/7. Well, no, hospice is available 24/7 by phone call, and then they can send somebody out if need be. But it's not, they're not in the home 24/7. And so seeing all the different aspects is what really, really drew me into the line of work that I do today, and then also starting the school that I have as well. Um, it was also taking a program that I had very high hopes for and fell short, very short of, and that is why I started IDLM, because I wanted to have a community for doulas to have support, to have a network, to be able to afford and the education, and also to be able to not just afford the education, but to receive that top-notch comprehensive training that they needed. And we are constantly updating our material. We're not just teaching from past experience, because I always, when I talk about this part, I always remember something that a history teacher said to me years and years ago. I think it was like in middle school. You got to know about history so that history doesn't repeat itself. And although those past experiences are great and we need those, there is still a new movement coming forward. And that is where we find ourselves here at IDLM, that we're constantly updating our material, expanding our material. And, once our students come in and take a course, they don't pay for those extras that we do. They don't pay to have the community that we offer. We have a separate community that's ran off of any other social media platform. It's a private network that they can go on to. It's like, I like to consider it like a Facebook for doulas. So they have that whole community. Not only that, when I say community, the students also get our phone numbers to reach out to us and to be able to connect with us and ask questions. A lot of my students say they started putting phone a doula so that they know, call me if they have a question. And so, you know, through my years of the journey and seeing this, and honestly, looking back when I first started working with families, at a young age, looking back, I really see even then we needed doulas. There was such a big need, and there's always going to be a need, and the need is going to continue to grow. We are going to be outnumbered. Period. We're already out being outnumbered with patients for our medical staff. We're already outnumbered, period, with for doulas, that we need more doulas in the industry to serve clients, because as you all know, the mortality rate is 100%. We're all going to die, and there's always more than what we can handle out there. So with the caseload. So yeah, we definitely need it, but really seeing and stemming through these years of my experience and working and still working to till today, I still have a caseload. I still have my private practice. I still work on staff with hospice. So seeing all of that, I keep constantly seeing the need for dual work, a matter of fact, for example, earlier this week, I went to go meet with a new client. And luckily, they are on hospice, but they didn't know that hospice was their new 911 for them. So when the patient had been falling and I asked, "Have you been letting hospice know?" They said, "No, we didn't know we needed to tell them."
Oh
They
my
didn't know a lot
gosh.
of things. They didn't know that they could choose their hospice that they want to use. They did not know about how the process works to revoke services and when you would want to do that or when that would take place. They didn't know they were still trying to communicate with their primary doctor. And I said, "No, your hospice diagnosis, you need to be communicating that with your hospice." So a lot of things I was referring back to hospice that they didn't know. So, I know sometimes hospices out there are a little afraid to work with doulas, but here's the reality. They should be working with doulas because doulas are really helping them. Just as I sat with that family and gave them the education of when to call hospice and how to ask for support with their hospice team, I just helped that hospice team. I just spent 2 hours with them that they didn't get to spend with that patient, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. And I love the fact that you have personalized, kind of what you were saying about your students can just call you. So I love that personalization, to your teachings and your organization. But yeah, definitely. I know I see that in the assisted living that I live in. They're like, well, I don't know. I didn't know that I could reach out or choose my own hospice or whatever the case may be. They just don't know. And it's not told to them. They're not educated on that, or there are other options for a doula or what they can get. And although I feel like I don't believe that medical coverages like insurance covers doula, but I feel like it should be important to cover that, because it's part of their process, it's needed. And hopefully at some time, point that will be, you know, part of it. So
Well, and absolutely, Laura. I wish there was some way that they could cover us to paying doulas. That would be a really important. My only concern is I never want to lose the right to say, I need to sit with this client for, they need me for 2 hours or they need me for 4 hours or whatever that is. I think we're all kind of getting to that point where we would love for it to be covered. And I think that would be a great thing, but don't tell me what I can and can't do to how long
mm,
I can support my families, right? I think that's the important thing that we don't want to lose.
right, exactly. Yeah, because once, they get a part of it, they're kind of like, okay, you can only do this.
We're
So
only
it's
going to
kind
cover
of
this
limiting at the
amount,
same
this
point.
amount. And that's what they've done with the medical industry, right? You think about it, with hospice is an umbrella of coverage. And so they can only, they have their regular routine of people going out there, and it's very difficult. But what hospice fails to understand and know, that having a doula part of their team actually increases their revenue for them. And I sit and work with multiple hospice agencies currently that I have been able to show them how that works, um And now I do say, I always say, Laura, that I don't recommend a new doula that has never had, maybe they've only worked with close family and friends. Of course not, don't go and start approaching hospices because you only get that one shot. And if you mess up that one shot, you ruin it for the rest of everybody, right? And the other thing is too, with doulas in education, although we don't have to have an education, I could write you a certification paper right now and just say, hey, Laura, you're a certified doula. But I feel that education, though, is really important. And I can only speak for myself here at IDLM. And the way that we've crafted our education is that there's so much more to it. It's not just sitting there and doing legacy work, or it's not just sitting there and going and doing certain things. There's a lot more to it. And we walk with our students. I've had students call me and say, hey, Anna, this hospice reached out to me. I need your help. Hey, I get on a Zoom call with the head people for those hospices and I'll handle it for them. And I'll work out the details. I've got things laid out already. Why reinvent the wheel, right? When we've
Mm-hmm.
got something and plugging it in there. And one thing too, I want to hit on too that you had talked about, especially with the assisted living. Many people don't realize that doulas are so important for assisted livings, for the nursing homes. One, it can give peace of mind to the family who can't always be there because a doula can come in and provide that companionship with the for the patient or the resident, and then also to be able to report back, hey, this is what's going on or this is what's not going on, and they can be an extra set of eyes and ears for sure. And I think that's very, very important. Very important. There's so many different aspects that doulas can go into to providing their private practice with. It's so important. So important.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. And it's just trying to find your way in, I think is the situation, to get them to let you work in their establishment or whatever the case may be. But
Yeah,
yeah.
a lot of education for sure.
Yeah. Now, how has being an end of life doula and educator changed your life?
A lot. A lot. It's taught me to pause. It has taught me to process my own grief and the things that I've gone through. Um, Families, we pour so much out to them, but then in return, when you sit back, I always like to process my cases afterwards, working with the family and client or residents, and then I realize what they have taught me. So there is such a journey of learning, and it also pours into your own personal life as well.
Perfect. Yeah, and I definitely see that. And it's just trying to be mindful because when I started working in the assisted living, I had to remind myself that they're not always in the present, right? They may have dementia, they may have other things going on, so you can't take it personal. You learn a lot of lessons,
Mhm.
from it, and it's a great takeaway, to practice,
Absolutely.
I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, what has been some of your most profound lessons that you've taken away from walking with people in death?
To make every moment count, to live day by day, by the hour, um, and also take that time to reflect back.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, definitely. That is definitely an important takeaway from that. Now, from your perspective, so what happens energetically or spiritually when somebody is nearing death? Have you experienced anything in the process of going through that with them?
It you can tell by the shifting of the air, I think sometimes in the room. You can also tell when you're working with somebody and there's a struggle with a family member that things are not being said that need to be said. You can walk in that room and you're like, oh, that's heavy in there. That air is super heavy. And then even after death, I've had a few times, we call them our angel kisses. And I it's very selective on patients. I don't know why, but where I have seen that someone has died, and when you walk back into the room or you turn and you go back to that person who's just died, and there's a smile on their face. There's this beautiful aura of peace and with them. And I've seen it several times throughout my years. And I remember one time we had it happen multiple times when I was working in the inpatient unit. And I remember we had a nurse, she was not on shift when that would happen. And the next time it happened, she was like, "Oh my gosh, it's like they're smiling, like you could really tell that they're at peace and that they're really, really happy." It's like maybe when they're taking their last breath or something and they're meeting whoever they're meeting or whatever is going on, and they're just overjoyed. And I think it's a really peaceful time for everybody. And when the families see that, it's really beautiful for them to know that their loved one is at peace.
Awesome. That is beautiful to know that, because I think there's like a negative reflection on death and a lot of fear around it. And that is also part of the reason why I'm being called to do what I'm doing, to kind of bring that down a little bit and help people to understand, that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay. It's part of our natural process. We're all going to go through it. Kind of like what you said, it's 100%
Right.
guaranteed. It's a
Exactly.
part of life, right? So how do you approach conversations about the afterlife mystery or the unknown clients and families? Have you had any of those discussions?
So when families do ask, and I find that it does get asked often, is I always revert it back to them, because remember, as a doula, it doesn't matter what our belief systems are, what we believe in, any of that, right? It's not about us. It's about them. And so I always turn it back to them. What do you believe? What do you think? And then they start to share, and then I say, okay, then that's what it is. That's what it is. It's whatever they believe. And I think it's really, really, really important as a doula that we always remember to take that step back and to remember that it's not about us or what we believe, but what the family, or for their partners, for their whoever, their caregivers, and even for what the patient believes, the client believes, and turning that
Right.
around to them.
Yeah, that is definitely important. Now, how I don't know if your extent of seeing near-death experiencers. I know it's been my experience and what I've went through in my process with that. I don't know, like I said, your scope of understanding or what you've been exposed to as far as near-death experiencers, spiritual awakenings. Do you see any parallels that play out with people who have experienced between death and that, and how that comes together?
I have had talks with clients that have said that they have experienced things, or maybe in the past, through their lives, that they've had, near death experiences. And they will often relate back to saying, I had this happen, and, I've started having, it's always seems like it's always like a dream for them, that they're seeing things, that it reminded them of that past experience that they had gone through. Um, I personally don't feel like I have, but then I also think back and I often wonder, if somebody didn't tell me something. I remember having a C-section, and I remember waking up and feeling like I had, for some reason, I felt at one moment that I could see myself above the table when I was having a C-section, and nobody would say anything, but the recovery, it was that one recovery, and I had four of them, okay, and four children. So I went through a lot of C-sections, and several of them I had to be put under. And the feelings of those coming back out, it wasn't the same as the first one, right? That one time that I felt like I really felt something really, really different. And it was a longer recovery. So, of course, I don't think that they're going to tell me that whatever happened, happened, as far as medically wise, but um, the things that I saw, the being above the table of the room, it was unique. And I find that our patients and my clients that I work with, if they've had something happen to them, that when it is that time, but also too remembering that a lot of our clients, when they're going through their process, I have noticed with my clients about 6 months or so before they actually start transitioning, they'll start having some vivid dreams of things, meeting with people that they loved that are already gone, and things like that. So
Wow, that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, and I've heard of people, they do talk about the out of body experience where they hover over their body in those different situations, medical situations, accidents. They just kind of feel like they're hovering over their body and they're watching it from a different perspective or a higher perspective. by their experience. And so that kind of is a great thing there, because it kind of simulates, you know, and it kind of parallels the two. And I kind of like to see, you know, how that all comes together, and as it is a natural part. And I know the medical field, of course, they don't want to talk about it. They don't dive into that aspect of it because it's more, I guess, spiritual or whatever the case you may be, you know, with that. Um, Now, being a doula, how can we help bring the awareness that death isn't the end, but it's maybe just a part of a continuum, while still helping them? You know, I guess it depends on their belief systems. You know, some people may believe that they end, but with the near-death experiencers, things like that, we may have a little bit more insight and not really to put our beliefs on them, or whatever the case may be. How do we, or can we, or should we let them know that, you know, it's not an end, you know, this is just a part of this life? Because I know Buddhists talk about that too. It's just a continuum. It's not really a full ending, but it's the ending of a life. And I feel like that would help with some of the grieving and the passing. You know, if we could look at it from that perspective. What is your take on that?
I always try to let our families and our clients guide us into those types of discussions. You know, I think also that sometimes, and I will tell you from my experiences and talking, you know, there's always a side I think that we all have as doulas that are a little unexplainable, right? Of what we do and what we our beliefs of things, and we're, you know, in this rim of things. But I always let my clients and my clients' families guide me into wherever they want to go. Um, you know, and just being open and honest to their questions. And it's okay to say you don't know something. You know, hey, let's bring in the chaplain. Let's bring in, you know, we also have our niches, right? So not every doula is going to have that spiritual niche, and that's okay. You know, and I've worked with clients too that have said, well, you know, I'm very heavily strong in my religion, and you know, we're taught that we're going to be saved and we're going to we can overcome any disease and we can do this. Why isn't this happening? And I think that's a big confusion for those that are very into their belief system. And I actually had a client that I was working with, and the family was like, you know, I still have to keep that belief that my loved one can be healed, and I said, you know what? And you're absolutely right. But right now, your loved one is transitioning. This is what we call active dying, because the breathing. And I go and I stepped them through what exactly we're seeing that their loved one was doing. And I said, I'm not here to say you're wrong or to say, no, that's not going to happen. Because you know what? There's higher powers, and they have that control. We don't, right? Us here on earth, we don't. So I encourage you to still keep that belief, but I also want you to see what could happen, because I would, it wouldn't be right for me to not give you the truth of what is actually here today, what we're seeing right now. Um, and they seem to help. That helps. It really does. Because we're not tearing down the beliefs of that, oh, you know, everybody's going to be healed, right? We're still allowing them to believe in their own way, but also we have to be realistic of they are actively dying right now. And we see this because the breathing pattern, the temperature change, the modeling that could be happening, you know, and that's where I start showing them. And I take them in the room and I show them, see, this is modeling, and notice the breathing, how it goes here. And we, you know, exhale, and then look at, there's a pause, and what that is, you know. So I think it's very important that we stay in that neutral lane with who we're working with.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, because it can end up in conflict, I think, if
Hmm.
we're being too
Cross the
pushy,
line.
you know, and telling them, and it's just letting it unfold as it should. Because although, you know, if in whatever whoever's belief is that, you know, we do continue after, we still go through the process of dying. So it's still going to happen, regardless of our belief systems. And I feel like that's part of delusion. And I know, not that I'm Buddhist, but I've learned a lot about Buddhism from reading some of the books, but they kind of take it from that perspective that the illusion or the delusion, is believing in one thing and then it's not happening. You're not in full presence with
Yeah.
understanding and acceptance, right?
No, and
And
I
then
love the Buddhist practices and what you can learn because there's so much to learn from the Buddhist practices. So much. I really, really do. And that's actually where the stem of my logo comes from, is the lotus flower and the belief that, and the color for the school is that teal color, the bluish color, because in the perspective from the Buddhist practices is that that color of that flower, stems from education and learning.
yeah,
So
yeah,
absolutely,
definitely.
absolutely agree with the Buddhist practices for sure.
Yeah, they do have a lot of great knowledge and wisdom to share. So, with the practices and rituals, have you found any more powerful than others that helps bring peace and meaning to the dying process, if you've done those?
Bathing, bathing does. I think especially if they have come out of the hospital, those clients that I have worked with, I have found that bathing really, really seems to bring peace and comfort. And I will tell you that a lot of times when I do the bathing, that it can be even 30 minutes, an hour, even a few hours after that, after we get them all clean and, maybe use some a little essential oils and we, maybe have to shave them out or, or do, some shaving or, and fixing their hair and washing their hair and all of that, that it's like a totally different peaceful calmness. And it's like, okay, I can relax now. And I have noticed where someone has clients of mine, you notice after that they start to change that active, really getting more into that heavier, closer active in stage there that takes place.
Awesome. So, with that, I kind of want to go off on another question, like two questions that came up actually. So, some people say that scents and things like that are something you shouldn't be using at certain stages of their passing. But also, I understand the topic of bathing because I mean, in everyday life, whenever, like, even just me, and I'm not on the deathbed yet, but well, who knows? Um, everyday showers are amazing, so I can understand how that would be very helpful, especially coming from like a hospice or a hospital where there's just so much energy and vibration of, people go there to they're sick, they're not well. And so to wash that off, it feels good and refreshing.
Yeah. I actually had a client one time that I was working in the IPU that I had just come on to shift and I was like, I went in to bathe and um, right after I had finished, he was taking his last breaths. So I called the RN in and I was like, hey, and the family had just shown up. But come to find out from their loved one that they were a person that would always take a shower in the morning, take a shower even during the day, and always before bed would take a shower. And that person, because they had just come out of the hospital and that whole experience of things going on, they hadn't gotten a good bath. They hadn't gotten a good washing and cleansing of things. And um, it made the family very peaceful that's how their loved one passed, was getting very comfortable and getting that washing. Um, and you're right. Sometimes, I always let the family lead with different types of scents and things if they want to do any of that. Some we just use normal soap and water. It just depends whatever the family wants. I always let the family lead.
Yeah, awesome. Now, how can preparing for death actually help us to live more fully and authentically?
I think because we can take the day by day things in life and we're going to live more to the fullest. I know that walking through with clients and seeing and hearing what they would have wished they would have done has really taught me to lead my life in a daily intention. Trying to make every moment, every hour count is so important.
Yeah, I agree. Because like if you know that at some point, and we realize it and we face it and we realize, okay, maybe someday, who knows what day, it could be from anything, we, God forbid, get into a car crash or something
Mhm.
happens. It helps us to live more presently and enjoy life
Absolutely.
to the fullest. Yeah. How do you see the role of death doula changing our culture relationship with death as you lead the international doula life movement?
More demanding, more need for advocacy, more need for support for doulas, more training, more education for doulas that they can be more empowered to help educate with the correct information and having those tools to do that. Um, but also knowing to stay in their own lane and to not step on those toes, right? And
Mhm.
um, be an advocate also to learn how to be that advocate for hospices or for home health or for our medical professionals. I build that relationship when I'm working with families so much that when, for example, if a nurse comes in and says, we're going to change to this medication and we're going to do this, blah, 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 blah. I've had families look at me like, are they really telling me the truth? And because of my experience of doing this so long, I can say yes, and this is why they want to do it. And then the nurse will chime in because they see that I'm trying to be a team player with them. I know what they're doing, and that's where, I think is so important for doulas to have a really, 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 really good background into this. And, I'll be honest, we have students that come from medical backgrounds, and we have a lot of students who come from no background whatsoever. But I think the important thing that I've learned and from what I've seen, and I've been very appreciative and love the feedback that I have gotten, is that even my medical professionals have come in and said, Anna, I thought, oh, because I'm already in this industry, I'm already working, that I wouldn't get too many takeaways. And it was quite the opposite. It gave them a new thinking of when they're out there seeing their clients and a new way of approaching in their own work as a medical professional. So we have a lot to learn from each other. And I always say, like, every class that we have is different. When we do our live online classes, it's very different because the students that make up that live online class is what makes that class different. It can be the same teaching materials, but it's everybody coming in. And I always encourage them to please share your experience because my experience is different from your experience. And that's how we're all going to learn. That's really how we're all going to learn. So I think being together and also wanting to lead with the doula hearts ourselves as we learn is so important.
Exactly. And I think we never stop learning. There's always something that maybe we're missing or something we don't see in a different light. And so having a whole group of people come in and share their experience, their knowledge, their wisdom can help to expand and, make that broad more, we can kind of have a better perspective on it,
Oh,
from everybody's
absolutely.
input. Yeah. And I love that this conversation, we uh, can go in any direction, a lot of directions with it, but I want to kind of bring it into a close. Do you have any last words for those watching and interested in this topic?
If you are called to be a doula, I would really, really, really want to encourage you to really seek out and really look into the training program that you decide to go with. And I have worked with many, many people that are just curious and that, need to have questions answered. And I always tell everybody, I will give you the good, the bad, the ugly. And I'm always happy to sit down and have conversations with those individuals that are just called or really want to know what it could look like and in that truth, of, what it can mean when you're out there in your practice and what does that look like for people. So don't hesitate to ask questions and, whatever training program that you may look at, and make sure that you also have a bridge of a community to support you through this. One of the things that we do in our community is we even offer grief support for our doulas. So whether it's going through a client and they need that support or their own personal grief, we have a grief group that meets once a month for our students to provide that extra support. So making sure that you also have that other support, the emotional, spiritually for yourself as well is very important.
Well, that is definitely important. Even like counseling, because years ago I used to do counseling for people with addictions. And it's like, even because with us forward facing the client, we kind of need somebody to go and talk to and kind of not
Right.
offload it to them, but help with us, our own path with
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
because it can get a lot for us, as doulas, or our professions, if we don't. Would you like to share where people can find you and reach out to you if they were interested in what you do, your school, or your service?
Yes, absolutely. So, if it's my private service for doula work, it is saviordoulaservices.com. And then for support as a doula, for education, if you're looking into becoming a doula, you can visit me at www.internationaldoulalifemovement.com. And we are on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, um, out there, Lincoln. You can find me on there as well. And we also do have a free discovery when you go to our website. At the top, you'll see throughout the landing page, there is links to our free discovery course where you can also learn more and even see some more examples through some student case studies, what doula work could look like for you.
Perfect. Thank you. It was a great conversation. And thank you again, Anna, for joining us today. And hopefully you can join us again in the future and we can kind of go over some other topics and.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure to get to meet you as well.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about you and me. We're not the one and only. It's going to happen to everybody. Yeah, baby. Say it isn't so, baby. It's the truth, don't you know, baby? We're all consciousness, living out our reason in a world of endless stories. Said from the beginning, we race to the finish as we face the harsh reality. We don't